There's been huge changes to the World of Warcraft economy over time. We can think of some of the original ones would be back in 2019. There was the introduction of layers, the changing of how Black Lotus spawn rates work, which is there's also been a recent modification to that too, but they're two separate changes. There's been expansions that have came out which have shifted the resources that players are after if they're meta slaves like myself. And of course, TOS changes with stuff like the disallowance of GDKP runs. But really, what impacts the economy the most is how players enjoy playing the game. Something I want you to remember if you rated it all in 2019 is flasks. Now, it was much, much harder to actually get flasks constructed in early 2019 than it is now in the anniversary edition. And I don't want to make this low IQ comparison with people who say, like, oh man, resources were so much cheaper in 2019 as compared to anniversary, because that's not really a good, at least inflation adjusted argument on the scarcity of materials. But something that I do want you to think about is without layers and with slower Black Lotus spawn rates, the flasks were a bit cheaper, probably adjusted for inflation. They were still more money early 2019. But the big thing was that there was just not this major demand for flasks, even among really quite serious players, at least at the start of 2019 Classic. And nowadays, player behavior is a lot more driven by the meta, and it's probably going to be continually more driven by the meta. And who knows why? I mean, something I'd like to tell myself is it's just most people who are casual at the game are not willing to suffer the consequences in raid of not taking the game seriously. Most people who say that parsing doesn't matter and then parse really poorly, and by really poorly I don't mean that you're getting top of the bell curve 50% parses, although that basically means you're not taking the game very seriously. But people who get gray parses, like if you get a gray parse and you're a DPS player or a tank player, you're fucking trolling everyone you play with. And if you wanted to construct an entire guild out of people who were gray parsing and saying that being sweaty is stupid and trying is stupid, they would just not kill hardly any of the bosses and stuff outside of MC. I think they would honestly not be able to clear BWL. And then they would all quit the game. They'd be bitching about each other's performance, which obviously makes no sense. But I do think that's how people are. Now, how did the flow of expansions come out? How did this change player behavior? How did it change the game economics? You can think when TBC comes out, all of a sudden the materials that become scarce for raid aren't the consumes because you don't have as many of them. You get two elixirs or you get a flask, you get like your food buff, weapon enhancements. It's like pretty much it, you know, and then you have your combat consumes like potions and health stones and stuff. And what really soaks up all the money, what really gets inflated, has all the gold in the game go to it, is things for professions. That's basically it. Like getting the stupid blacksmithing hammers, the cloth gear for tailoring. That's where all the gold in the game goes. And I would say that's because that is what makes sense to optimize your character's performance. All of the gold goes there. But what's nice about this is if you play in TBC and you're a person who wants to do their best when they do an activity, but you really can't be fucking bothered to spend 15 hours a week playing WoW, you can raid log. You can do a couple heroics a week with friends for fun, and you'll have enough gold to afford all your consumes, and you'll probably never be able to get your true prebis put together. You'll never be able to get enough gold to get your blacksmithing hammers, get your blacksmithing levels, and the same thing with tailoring. However, in raid, you will be really quite effective. You'll be 90-95% of the way there, and now you got to save all this free time. And if you're a really try-hard player, you have this chase you can go after where you can go and find a way of acquiring gold, although a lot of people are just going to buy it. And then you can go get your skills up and maybe do some quests involving the skills. That's not always necessary. And then get your gear made, and you get this little bit of reward. It's a cool game, I guess, gameplay loop. I'm not super into that. I really just like the raids personally, but that I think is a lot more healthy than the way it works in classic WoW. And then I'd say Wrath the Lich King takes this a step even further, where they kind of nerf professions into being better enchants on your gear generally. And so then in Wrath, you can just totally neglect gold, and the only thing you're missing out on is like the card decks, which are amazing trinkets. They're, don't get me wrong, they're really really good, but you miss out on the decks, and you miss out on some extra enhancements on your gear. It matters even less than TBC, and I think that's really good for casual players. It makes it very unpunishing to just not be a large figure in the game economy. But I think the game gets worse as time goes on, other than that. Like, if in Classic they made it so that, and I wouldn't want them to do it this way, but if in Classic they made it so there was more restrictions on how many consumes you could use at once, probably it'd make the game feel better for casual players. It would mean that you currently, in the exact time slice where they put this patch in, you save a little gold in raid because you literally can't spend as much. But over time, it would also greatly reduce the actual demand for all these materials. It would probably shift more of the gold going towards items like Lionheart, and so that would make the game, I would say, more approachable for a casual audience or a raid logging audience. But they could also accomplish stuff like that by just making more of the BOE stuff in the game a handout. And I think that would make a lot of people happy, actually. I don't think too many people really do enjoy the making gold part of the game as much as they believe. Something that is misunderstood by, I think, people who haven't played on private servers is just how inefficient it is to, I shouldn't say inefficient, how difficult it is to acquire resources in the game if there aren't tons of gold buyers all over the place making stupid, unoptimized decisions with their gold and creating lots of opportunities for you as a non-gold buyer to profit. If you were to go play on a private TBC server and you were going to, for example, test how much gold you can make doing different gold making methods, you'd find that it's a lot harder to find ones that beat the others. For example, one that does beat a lot of others would be having a gathering profession, usually mining, and then having engineering so you can get the gas motes. But there's a moat involved in getting moat, like as in like the business term moat, involved in getting to actually be able to do that. You need epic flying for it to really be economical, and so that helps a lot. Whereas if you want to compare, let's say, picking herbs to just mining, there's not going to be a large difference in how much gold you can make. And this is true with a lot of other methods of making gold as well. There's some things that are exceptionally good. I would say like getting deviate fish is quite often a really good way to farm gold in almost any version of the game, but it's kind of hard to sell them. So you can't do it like 10 hours a week. It just, you won't be able to sell all the fish. It's not going to work out. But when you play on these servers that are live, where Blizzard doesn't police RMT at all, there are just so many inefficiencies in the economy, and it can give a player who doesn't buy gold the impression that, oh wow, if there wasn't any RMT, I would just be like filthy rich from doing whatever activity they're doing that generates gold. Where the reality is that you would actually have a lot less material at the end of your work session, even though prices on everything would be a lot lower. All the work that you're doing that doesn't just give you pure gold drops, it would also give you a lot less money. And the reduction in prices wouldn't be as, it would not be sufficient enough to really make up for this. When you go play on private servers, it's not like all these people who play the game a lot just have every item in the game and all consume. No, it's more like people are really really broke, and if and at least on the TBC private server I played on, if you had all the best crafted gear, that was basically enough to get you into almost any guild on the server. And I mean like literally almost any guild. Like a lot of the top guilds would, that's basically it. If you had all of the crafted shit, they would let you try out. And that's kind of funny because that's all they'd have to go on. They wouldn't have like great logs and stuff. They wouldn't necessarily make sure that you like know somebody or anything. They'd just be like, oh yeah, they got all this shit, because it was such a bottleneck. But also there's other factors too. I don't want to act like getting a hold of the gold was the whole the whole of that issue right there. What I think people really get out of World of Warcraft is they get some sense of mastery by playing the game and accomplishing tasks, and there's a little bit of that to be had with earning money and saving up. but I don't really think there's all that much of that. I mean, in the real world, there's a lot more to be gained by being financially responsible, finding out how to make more money, saving more money, and very few people do that ever. Most people have a zero or negative net worth, or like, I guess if you can count their car and their house, that's not true, but those are liabilities for maybe not the car, but the house is a liability for a huge number of people. So it's just it's a little bit of a goofy take in my opinion to say that the game having an economy naturally of course just makes it more fun. I do think that having chores in the game can make some sense though. For example, I've been confronted with the idea before that maybe instead of speed running we should just go very fast in raids and try to basically make it so we spend as little time on the raids as possible. I've had a couple people bring this idea up to me, and I don't think that's a good idea for my guild because I don't think getting people off the game as quickly as possible is good for the community. And I do think there'd be some risks of that in classic WoW, like if you made it so that way people could have their raid leader do a ready check and it was like yes, no, teleport to instance. And if once you go into an instance and you engage the, let's say, the first boss in the raid, the second you enter combat, everybody, only the first time, but the first time you enter combat on the first boss of the raid, everyone in the whole raid gets all their world buffs applied, something like that, and all their consumes. And so now, kind of the way that you would raid log is you'd log in, let's say, 15, 20 minutes before raid, you get into a group, then you press teleport to dungeon, then you fucking press yes on the ready check, and you guys start pulling, you kill some bosses, they hand out the loot, and then you log out. And that's it. I don't think that would necessarily be very good for the game. I think that'd be bad for it because it would take a lot of the player-to-player interaction out. But I don't think that going and picking herbs all on your own really puts in a lot of player interaction. I think things like boosting actually puts in a decent amount of player interaction, and things like people selling items to each other, maybe not in GDKPs, but when people sell like item boosts like Hodge, I think that definitely creates player interaction. There are things the economy that are good, but most of it is people doing menial activities that they don't really derive any enjoyment from, and I don't think that really is super good. And a lot of people who play the game play it in a really solitary way, so it's not even like they are going around picking flowers and hanging out with their friends in Discord. They're listening to music, smoking a lot of weed, picking flowers. And then they go to the auction house and they sell the item. There's no face-to-face interactions. They get gold. Then they buy whatever materials they need that they believe they can't efficiently farm for themselves. And then they run to raid, and it's probably a pug. And they maybe talk to people in raid chat during the pug, and then they log out. I definitely don't think there's that much I don't think there's that much at risk making the economy a smaller part of WoW. And it appears to me, I've only played Classic, TBC, and Wrath. I played like a retail for like 6 hours, so I'm not really going to comment on that. But it does appear to me that the economy gets increasingly less important in versions of the game further from the original vanilla version. And although I like vanilla the most at its best, like in raid, fully buffed, all the work's already done, let's go guys. That's like my favorite part of the game. I think vanilla, that's awesome. It's way better than the other raids. But I think that they could steal the economy type changes and make vanilla better. They could have the game be almost entirely the same, and they could, for example, add TBC style Priebus. Or they could go full Wrath style and have it be where crafting professions give you slightly better versions of Crusader or something. And then all the gold would shift over to things that are of less importance, whereas in Classic, oh man, just like all the consumes are so important, all of them. It's crazy. It's like you can even be a priest. You can get like an armor consume that gives you like 500 fucking armor, and it's gonna be like 7% more effective HP if you get hit with like an AOE that's physical based AOE, and that can like save all your world buffs and all your other consumes. That's so bananas, and that's probably the most one of the least useful consumes in the game for a lot of people would be like, you're a ranged character, you have like a mana bar, armor consume, and it can still do that for you. And they just get more and more important from there. And casual players are locked out from enjoying these things when they make the game so much more fun, especially combat consumes, like being able to use things like free action potions freely without worry, rage pots. Engineering consumes are like really cheap, so I don't really feel like they're too big of a deal. Like armor potions, fucking resto pots, fucking pre-popping protection potions, so that way you can try to do more goofy stuff and like AoE things. Like all that stuff makes the game feel so much more interactive and alive, and most players have never gotten to enjoy it. Most people have never stacked the mobs on Domo and AoE'd them, or if they did, they stacked like half of them, and it's really not the same. It's still cool, but it's really not the same. Or most people haven't focused Sulfur and Harbinger and then cleaved the ads down and like AoE'd them. Most people have never done that, which probably sounds wild to a lot of people who'd see this video, because most likely you take the game arguably too seriously. Although I wouldn't say that, but I think most people would. But that's the average experience for WoW players. It's a really solitary game. People join a different guild every time they come back. They come and go semi-frequently, play for a few months, quit for a few months. Don't really get to know anybody. They don't really consume and raid. They're not going to really get their prebis. They're still going to be concerned with loot. They're not going to really understand what's going on around them. I wonder how many of those players would like the game more and be our friends, good friends, if they could, without spending a lot of money in the real world or in the real game, just get involved in this shit. Like speedrunning and parsing. It can be a little toxic at times. I don't want to say in the wrong group, but in groups that are very, very, very serious about their performance, there's going to be requirements. And if people don't meet them, they won't be allowed in. And there's nothing wrong with that. That kind of stuff happens in the real world too, and freedom of association is important. But there's also just tons of guilds that are filled with people who think it's cool to do a little better than last week. And that's most guilds. Most guilds that are trying at all think it's cool when they do a little better. And most people anywhere in their lives, when they think they are pretty consistently, not even all the time, but like, maybe like 60, 70% of the time they're getting better, they're having a whole lot of fun. And that's something that I just don't think there's really an argument against that being a thing. And when you're not consuming at all because you have the perception that you can't, because you don't want to fucking put in the necessary efforts to get all your shit prepared, well, you're going to have way more variance in your raids. You're going to be locked out of playing with a lot of different types of people, so you probably lose the whole group dynamic part. And then this game's just going to seem like a big waste of time, and why are all these people playing in guilds and doing weird things like loot council and pretending to be friends, and they go and they take it way too seriously, and I'm so upset I'm going to go to a fucking 97-minute MC pug and then quit in 2 months. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy. Anyways, if any of you guys are looking for a guild where people hang out and they get to know each other, and we take the game pretty fucking seriously, but we're not going to yell at you if you fuck up. Probably. Hit me up in Discord. We play on Night Slayer, North America, PvP. I probably can't fit any druids or rogues, but maybe I can fit a rogue. Hit me up. I'm not going to freak out at you or anything. Thanks for watching.